I was downgrading, so my sister tried to ruin my wedding, but she didn't know who he was. Congratulations. If your own sister has ever publicly humiliated you in front of a large crowd in a chapel just before your wedding vows. As president, treasurer, and emotional messianic leader of a group I never joined, here I am. Allow me to explain. The name Claire Delaney is mine. As a 31-year-old literature teacher in a South Carolina high school, I once thought that family drama was limited to Bravo reality shows or teenage journals. That is, until my sister Emily destroyed our love like it was her own campfire because she believed my fiancé wasn't worthy of me. To be clear, Emily has always been good at subtly destroying things. She is 4 years older than me, has a smug little smirk that makes you feel like your soul has just been audited, and dressed like a walking Saks Fifth Avenue magazine. She married a finance guy in Atlanta after graduating from Duke, moved into a McMansion with a wine cellar and 2 French cheese-themed poodles, and then went on to live life as if it were one huge corporate partnership. I could almost hear her eyebrows hitting the roof when I told my family that I was seeing a bartender named Ben. A bartender? She asked, lowering her wine glass gently as if I had offended it. You're dating someone who pours beer for a living, and you visited Amherst? I firmly bit my tongue. Ben is more than just a barman. He is a business student. He is honest, kind, and intelligent. Emily cocked her head and examined me as if she were diagnosing a skin condition. Claire, emotions don't help people move up the social scale. You're losing ground, and you're not even aware of it. I wanted to shout that maybe being with someone nice, enthusiastic, and kind mattered, and that not everyone has to live their life as if it were a LinkedIn endorsement. But if someone speaks condescendingly, you can't yell at them. It's similar like shouting in a room that is soundproof. She met Ben for the first time at our dad's 61st birthday. He brought a bottle of homemade booze that he prepared himself, yes. He is skilled, wore a white button-up, and gave it to my mother with a heartfelt note. Emily examined him as if he were an unforeseen expense. So, she murmured syrop-sweetly, Claire says you're a bartender. It must be enjoyable. You pour beverages well, don't you? Ben merely grinned. Not too awful. I simply make an effort to avoid getting it on anyone's expensive silk. My drink almost choked me. Despite her stiffness, Emily managed to create a smile that gave you the impression that Botox would break. She had it out for him after that day. Instead of saying congratulations when we told her we were engaged, she said, Are you getting married next to a taco truck or behind a bar? Stop, I said. Informed her that Ben was more than she could possibly comprehend. She was instructed to keep to her own dazzling path. What did she say? You're squandering your future on a man who has no wealth, no prestige, nothing at all. Claire, love doesn't cover college expenses. I ended the call. That night, Ben held me, claimed it was irrelevant, that he recognized. However, I could see it in his eyes how her words managed to get through even when you didn't want them to. She wasn't merely disapproving. She proclaimed war. She then launched the campaign of smears. She informed our relatives, cousins, and even my old employers that I was experiencing a crisis, that I was being used, that I was settling for less. This is where things start to go crazy. For the entire time, Emily was unaware that my ostensibly low-status fiancé, Ben, was the only son of Richard Bennett, the CEO of Bennett and Company, one of the nation's largest restaurant conglomerates. How much is your net worth? A little over $900 million. Yes. The wine cellar she boasts about on Facebook could be purchased by my bartender lover. Twice. However, he didn't. Because he doesn't use money to lead. He doesn't think it exists. Ben accepted a position as Ben Hart at a small tavern in Charleston. No relationships. No credit cards that have the word black in their name. Only a dream, an absurd work ethic, and an apron. He scrubbed countertops during the day and studied business at night. His father brought him up to earn it, not because he had to. He once said to me, I won't take a CEO position until I've held every position that keeps the company running. And I fell in love with that person. Emily was unaware. Nobody did. That was the main idea. We didn't want our love to be treated like a business deal. When there was nothing to gain, we wanted to find out who truly supported us. In case you missed it, Emily failed the test. She arrived to the bar one day, not to say hello, but to see for herself. She entered the establishment as if she owned it, ordered a sugar-free martini, and once Ben delivered it to her, she took a big gulp and remarked, "For someone who stirs for tips, it's not bad." He grinned. "We only take member cards or cash here," he said, and turned to go. She stopped. I chewed the inside of my cheek to contain my laughter as I stood close by. She might have fainted on the ground if she had realized that the heir to the empire she worships had just graciously ignored her. Then, she intensified her efforts, sent me an essay with 3 paragraphs, explaining why Ben was most likely a scammer, why a man who could tie a flawless Windsor knot, knew great whiskey, and spoke French must be a scammer. I believed her. I allowed her to believe I was the idiot, because I wanted her to be honest with me, on her own terms. The wedding date was decided. Tiny chapel, a modest ceremony, reception in a location of Ben's choosing, yes. Emily made another attempt. "Don't expect me to show up if there isn't any salmon flown in from Norway." I grinned. "Then perhaps save gas." She was unaware that their flagship venue, the Bennett House, would host the celebration. A location so exclusive that there isn't even a line for public reservations. She had no idea what was going to happen. However, I did. At my wedding, she stood up and attempted to set it on fire. I always assumed that wedding catastrophes only occurred in clickbait headlines or movies, bridezillas, unresponsive caterers, and some strange uncle who drinks too much and approaches a bridesmaid. However, I never thought my own sister would ignite the match at my ceremony. The event took place at Street Cypress Chapel, a little historical site nestled beneath trees covered with moss. Brandon Ben, really. But let's just talk about Brandon for the moment, since that's who he is, was at the altar. Be calm, powerful. He had a small smile on his face, and his hands were folded softly, as if he had been waiting all his life for this moment. Then it took place. Her voice broke the stillness as the music was about to stop, and I was walking down the aisle for the first time. "Claire, halt!" Everything came to a halt. I stopped in my tracks. The guests' rapid head turns resembled a staged performance. Brandon remained motionless, but I could see his shoulders tense up a little. Emily got up from her place in the first row, as if she were being given a standing ovation. She had on a dress that was blood crimson, blood not burgundy, not maroon, as if she had intended to represent a fire alarm visually. Perfectly powdered face, slicked back hair, and 4-inch heels. On the cover of a fashion magazine, she appeared to be a villain. "You must not be allowed to do this," she sobbed. "You're committing the most significant error of your life." Hate was building up behind my ears, not shame. Fury. There was no sound in the chapel. Even the muttering of others sounded far away, as if it were underwater. My dad placed a hand on my mom's arm as she attempted to rise up. Brandon remained motionless, his eyes fixed on her, his mouth tensed, but he remained silent. Emily strode down the aisle, as if she were making her concluding argument in court. "Claire, you're getting married to a bartender." She spat the term bartender as if it were a sickness. "You graduated from Amherst with a degree. Anybody might have been your spouse. For tips, why are you content with someone pouring drinks?" I was having trouble breathing. It wasn't shock, from rage. I looked over at her. "You're making a fool of yourself." "No, Claire," she said. "I'm attempting to save you. Because it's obvious that you don't see what other people do. He is taking advantage of you." What I was intending to say next didn't even cross my mind. The words simply flowed out, as if they had been held in reserve for years. I've never met somebody who treated me as well as Brandon does. He pays attention. I am respected by him. My degree, my resume, and the number of zeros in my bank account are all irrelevant to him. He simply adores me, and I would rather be with someone like that for the rest of my life than be with someone who views others as stepping stones for 5 minutes. I thought Emily's eyes could pop out from the force of her role. When you live in a tiny apartment and split rent with a man who can't even afford valet parking, you'll regret this. As if anticipating a round of applause, she turned to the guests. "As you sit here, you're all allowing her to trash her life?" Nobody made a move. Nobody stood up for her. Not even the cousins for whom she used to purchase pricey presents in order to maintain her influence. Brandon, too? He took a step forward, as calm as ever. "We don't have to do this," he said in a whisper as he gripped my hand. "Even if we head straight back out the door, I'll still be here with you." I glanced up at him, still grinning, stable. "No," I replied. "This is what we're doing. With or without her." Emily laughed, quite loudly. "All right," she said. "But when you're broke and realize that love doesn't cover the expenses, don't come to me in tears." She then bounded out. The church floor echoed with the click of her heels. Behind her, the doors banged like thunder. Quiet. The officiant cleared his throat after that. "Should we go on?" Yes, we did. That, in some way, gave it greater realism, more truthful. The fairy tale had given way to our reality, and I took pride in it. But I won't always remember that portion. Later on, that happened. Following the ceremony, Brandon and I drove away in an old silver Aston Martin that belonged to his grandfather. To our surprise, Emily always said that we would most likely take an Uber to our own wedding. My heart pounded as we arrived at the Bennett House, a restaurant so elite that it isn't visible on Google Maps. Not because of nerves, out of expectation. "Are you ready?" Brandon inquired, leaning over. I remarked, "I've been waiting for this my entire life." The doors made of glass opened, chandeliers made of crystal, floors made of mahogany, mellow violin music. A line of white-gloved waiters stands. Then, just as expected, she entered. "Emily, red is still used." Smug as ever. She looked around, likely prepared to scoff at whatever cheap location she believed we had found. The wall behind the bar, however, caught her attention. The Bennett logo. She hesitated, perplexed. "Welcome back, Mr. Bennett," she saw one of the servers say with a bow. Brandon turned to her with a smile. "Welcome to my family's restaurant, Emily." Her soul departed her body, I promise. She opened her mouth a little. As if someone had suddenly switched the color dial to monochrome, her face went white. "What?" she gasped. "You mentioned," I assumed. "You assumed I was merely a bartender," Brandon remarked. "And the point was that." Then a kind voice resounded behind us. "My grandson getting married to a lady with genuine elegance?" A boon to the Bennett household. The grandpa of Brandon entered. Richard Bennett. He gave Brandon a hug, then added, "Welcome, daughter-in-law," turning to face me. Whispers erupted throughout the room. "What about Emily?" Her glass of champagne broke on the marble floor after slipping out of her grasp. The night my sister was eventually recognized for her true self. No one moved for a moment. Still wearing her red dress, Emily stood in the center of the reception hall, her hand in midair as if she were attempting to hide the fact that she had just dropped her glass in front of more than 100 people. It sounded like a gunshot as the crystal broke against the Italian marble. Everyone suddenly noticed her, not as the ideal sister. No, not as the refined woman who perpetually had it all together. They saw her for what she truly was, a resentful, conceited woman who chose the worst time to display her worst qualities. The murmurs increased in volume. It was whispered, "That's her?" From the event? Another. Did she actually yell at the bride from a standing position? Then the last blow was delivered. Richard Bennett, Brandon's grandfather, appeared as if he were the godfather of elegance, strength, and traditional authority, all combined into one kind. Menacing figure. The way a judge looks at a defendant who has just attempted to represent themselves in court is how he looked at Emily. "Be calm. Unblinking. I'm disappointed. So you're the one who ruined my grandson's wedding," he said. Emily's mouth opened as if she were going to tell a lie, then shut it once more. The scream inside her skull was so loud you could practically hear it. "I had no idea," she began. "Uncertain about what?" Richard inquired. "That my grandchild was him? That he's a wealthy man?" He didn't speak louder. He didn't have to. Each syllable sounded like a judgment. He asserted that even if Brandon were only a bartender, that's still an honest profession. Your actions today were not protective. It was brutality. Emily grew smaller. It was visible to the naked eye. Her shoulders dropped. She lowered her chin. The air appeared thinner around her. Everyone was observing. Nobody intervened. She was aware of it. Her audience didn't want her to win for the first time in her life. I watched from close to the head table. A part of me wanted to intervene, to interrupt, to provide her a way out, but I remained motionless. This was not retaliation. This was not retaliation. It was simply reality setting in. Richard went on, his voice unwavering. You believed you had the right to determine someone's value based on what? An employment title? Their footwear? What about their bank account? He gave a headshake. I'm not in class, Miss Delaney. That is haughtiness. Emily tried to say anything at all, but all she managed to say was a choked half apology. I simply believed Claire was being exploited. Richard gave her a long, hard stare. What you call concern was just dressed up contempt, he stated at the end. He then faced me. He extended his hand. Claire, should we start the festivities off right? I nodded while suppressing 1,000 feelings for which I lacked the necessary words. The music resumed after he signaled to the band. The glass was cleared by the workers. What about Emily? She remained motionless for a few more seconds before stealthily making her way to the final table in the corner, by themselves. After then, the reception was perfect. Not a drama. No tantrums. Candlelight, music, food, and the steady, quiet hum of people still taking in what had just happened. With dishes like wagyu, saffron risotto, and handcrafted sweets that were flown in from Milan, the menu was a picture of perfection. Brandon had personally chosen every element. Months earlier, he had planned it as a present rather than a flex. To me. To us. Emily was sitting with her hands folded and not touching her dish when I turned to look at her. She had no one to talk to. Not with malice. Simply put, avoidance. You sensed it. Her formidable demeanor had given way to discomfort. From admired to unimportant. She once raised her head to stare directly into my eyes, and I saw terror for the first time in my life. Do not be afraid of me. She is afraid of herself. The knowledge that she had gone too far and couldn't go back. That no more eye rolls, smart comments, or jokes were available to spin this. Simply the fact that she had embarrassed herself in front of the people she had devoted her entire life to attempting to win over. Brandon leaned closer. You think she'll say she's sorry? I didn't respond. Because, in all honesty, I didn't give a damn. No more. As the last meal was cleared by the servants and the champagne flutes were glowing gold in the candlelight, Brandon got up to make a toast as the evening came to a close. He remained silent. He doesn't do that. However, he did mention this. Thank you to everyone who came today. For seeing us, not just for coming. For recognizing kindness beyond wealth and love beyond position. And to those who found it difficult to see, we hope you will someday. A pause occurred. Everyone turned to see Emily. She remained still, because the people who really matter in life don't care what you do for a living, he went on. How you treat other people matters to them. My chest constricted. I gave his hand a squeeze beneath the table. Suddenly, the evening evolved into something more than a wedding. It turned into a pivotal moment. Not for me alone, not only for Brandon, for her. She only had rain and regret when she arrived at my door. The wedding had taken place almost a year ago. A year of silence. No texts, no calls, not even a greeting on your birthday. Emily had left my life like an erased file, the weight of which you don't understand until your desktop feels lighter without it. Near Charleston Bay, Brandon and I were residing in a modest but bright penthouse. We had nothing to show off. By this point, he was more actively involved with the Bennett Group, managing staff mentorship and regional expansions. I continued to instruct. Although it wasn't glamorous, our lives felt genuine, as if we'd created something that didn't require attention. Then, one evening, shortly after 10 p.m., someone knocked on the door. For hours, there had been a strong storm. Sideways, rain, thunder, and wind that shook the windows, as if it were attempting to enter. I assumed it was a delivery error. I unlocked the door. There she was. Emily, permeated. The matted chunks of her once golden hair stuck to her face. No cosmetics, no footwear. She appeared to have slept in her clothing, if you can call it that. No coat, no purse. Only her and a set of bulging eyes that I could hardly identify. We both stood there for a moment. They took everything, she said in a whisper. Like wet paper, her voice cracked. The residents. The vehicles. The accounts. Michael is no longer there. I said nothing at all. Simply moved aside. The marble floor she had once ridiculed was covered in muddy footsteps as she entered like a shattered statue. Brandon emerged with a folder from the study. When he spotted her, he paused, did not speak up. He only gave a small nod, as if he understood. Emily didn't even give him a glance. As if gravity had finally prevailed, she simply sank into the couch's edge. I brought her some tea and a towel. She clutched the mug as if it were her only remaining source of warmth. Then she said it. Michael has been taken into custody. Insider dealing. Deception. I promise, I had no idea. The SEC, however, has since frozen everything. I was interrupted by his relatives. There is nowhere for me to go. Her mouth was shaking and her eyes were crimson as she gazed at me. Can you assist me, Claire? For a moment, I just sat there and stared at the woman who had once predicted that when my bartender dream failed, I would end up crying in front of her. I could have been overwhelmed by the irony. I didn't gloat, though, since I witnessed it. That expression, the authentic one, not the pride, not the fury, the object beneath, humility. The silence was broken by Brandon. One of the restaurants has an apartment above it. It's peaceful and clean. It's safe, but it's not luxurious. You are free to remain there if you so choose. Emily blinked as if she didn't think he was real. Really? I gave a nod. Just one requirement. She waited. You labor in the eatery, starting at the bottom. No preferential treatment. She opened her mouth. You mean a server, huh? Brandon remained unflinching. Server.dishwasher.food courier. Everything they require. The manager of the shift will be your supervisor. No exclusions. She peered into her teacup. For a long time, I thought. Then she said, I'll do it, if that's what it takes. It was a cruel first morning. 6 a.m. CALLL time. The Bennett Group chain's modest eatery, the hearth, wasn't particularly glitzy. No dim illumination, no violins. There was nothing but clanging plates, overheated kitchens, and a head cook named Maribel who had a zero-tolerance policy for indiscretion. From the window upstairs, I observed. I was of no assistance. I didn't step in. I merely observed. Emily wearing a simple uniform with her hair pulled back and without any makeup, lashes or acrylics, her coffee spilled, was reprimanded for utilizing the tray's incorrect side, dropped a fork by accident, and was instructed to clean the entire area. Her hands were red from washing by 11 a.m. She had cleaned a public restroom by 2 p.m. She seems to have survived a small war by the end. She hardly talked when I gave her dinner that evening. In the apartment upstairs, she sat on the edge of the tiny twin bed and spooned rice into her mouth as a form of penance. She said, You didn't have to bring food. I understand, I replied. However, you arrived. You didn't run. Slowly, she nodded. Then, quietly, I apologize for everything. There was no great apologies. There were no sobs or speeches of redemption. It was simply real. It was also novel. The following day, Brandon dropped by with a training packet. Every worker receives one, he declared. You'll switch between every position. You will be informed if you make a mistake, the same as everyone else. Emily used both hands to pick up the packet. If I can't keep up, will I lose my job? He was not smiling, not by me, by the supervisor. And she won't give a damn about your identity. She was reading the training packet under a desk lamp that night, as if it were her last hope for redemption. Perhaps it was. After 3 weeks, she pulled a skillet out of the oven, without wearing mitts, and burned her hand. Screamed. I nearly dropped it. Next time, use your brain, Chef Maribel replied firmly after glancing over, as well as gloves. No sympathy. No pity. Emily didn't leave abruptly, made no phone calls. She simply bit her lip, put on gloves, and resumed plating the salad station. That's when I realized. She was not going anywhere. After losing everything, my sister ended up peeling potatoes. Emily remained at the hearth 6 months later. I'm still getting in before the sun comes up. While customers hardly looked at them, they continued to sweep floors, scour pans, Remember soup specials and wipe down tables. There was no longer a red dress. The arrogant appearance, the fancy shoes, and the fixation on optics are all gone. Someone I hardly recognized but was at last getting to know took their place. I went in one evening to get takeout after my final class. I didn't announce my arrival. I was curious to find out. Her task was dish duty. She wore her hair in an untidy bun, with stray pieces clinging to her cheeks. Her hands appeared raw, unpolished, but genuine, and there was a small spot of grease on her collar. Powerful. Sincere. At first, she didn't notice me. She and another employee, a 19-year-old boy called Javier, were giggling. They were making jokes about who had the nastiest apron, and I watched my sister laugh without resentment, for the first time in, well, maybe forever. Pure, foolish, exhausted laughter. She saw me observing, grinned. She wiped her hands and said, "Hey, allow me to get your food." We ate from cardboard containers while sitting on the curb outside the restaurant a short while later. The only sounds were the clink of forks on takeaway platters and the gentle hum of streetlights. She turned to face me. "I used to believe that living this kind of life would kill me, you know?" "And?" I inquired. She gave a shrug. "As it happens, it saved me." For a long time, we sat in silence. Then she said something that caught me off guard. "Remember when I told you that love isn't a source of income?" Slowly, I nodded. I believe the reason I said that was because I had no idea what love was. It appeared to be money to me. Situation. Cheers. It appears to be quite similar to this. She raised her rough hands, broken nail polish. Her knuckles were recovering from a faded burn mark. She remarked, "Looks ugly sometimes, but it feels clean." I didn't answer. I simply reached over and gave her shoulder a light tap. The apology was that. That was the reconciliation. No impromptu hugs, no speeches, no strings of "I've changed." Just two ladies eating cardboard coleslaw and fried chicken while sitting on a curb in the dark, allowing the past to remain silent between them and no longer speak for them. Eventually, Emily completed her entire shift at the eatery. She made no requests for favors, didn't request a step skip. 6 months later, she submitted an application to culinary school, alone. No previous connections phoned, no last name was pulled. Just a woman who discovered she had the strength to begin at zero. I assisted her with the paperwork, as did Brandon, but we only did that. The rest she took care of. She texted me a picture last week. She was wearing a white chef's coat, her hands on a tray of freshly prepared pasta, her face gleaming, her sleeves rolled up. First dish for one person. It's not ostentatious. However, it belongs to me. I spent a lot of time looking at that paragraph. Because this sister wasn't the one who had tried to set my wedding on fire. It was someone else, someone fresh, someone I looked up to. And me? I don't harbor resentment. No more, since I've gained knowledge. People don't always need to be punished. They require context. And sometimes, the only way to discover who you were destined to be is to lose everything. Emily was never bad, simply lost. Rightfully so. She was raised in a society that believed love was associated with wealth and labels. But she had to make a decision when that world fell apart, when no one remained to impress and no image remained to project. Go real or go smaller. Real was her choice. And I can finally say, for the first time in over 30 years, that I'm proud of my sister, not for the person she feigned, but for the person she turned into.